the significant progress that we have made in protecting our children. As the Director of Youth Programming and Engagement with the No Boundaries Coalition, it is my honor to introduce a host of speakers this evening who will share developments and strides to ensure a safe society for our children and youth. The Child Interrogation Protection Act represents a significant step forward in our ongoing commitment to child safety. We remain dedicated to creating a society where children can feel safe, protected, where their voices are heard, and their rights are respected. We look forward to working together with all of our stakeholders to ensure an effective implementation and enforcement of this act, and we ask that everybody continues to support the safety of our children and youth. To welcome everyone here to the Baltimore Unity Hall, a place that we call home, I'd like to introduce our Executive Director, Ashia Parker.
We definitely want to thank Shalise for her awesome organizing and getting us here today. As Shalise said, I am Ashia Parker, the Executive Director of No Boundaries Coalition, and welcome to the Baltimore Unity Hall where we are headquartered. We take a lot of pride in our space and invite you in to see what we do. So we hope that you come around again and visit us. Today I want to thank everyone for coming as we bring awareness to child safety laws. It is a part of our mission to ensure that residents of 21217, especially our youth, are knowledgeable about the law and their basic rights. Our community, including all of Baltimore residents, have a fundamental responsibility to protect our young people and those who are part of vulnerable populations. Over the years, No Boundaries Coalition has done tremendous work to push forward police accountability, and part of that work is ensuring that all residents in our community, especially young folk, understand and know their rights. We want to give a special thank you to the American Civil Liberties Union for spearheading this work and collaborating with No Boundaries Coalition as a trusted community partner. Thank you again and welcome.
All right, now we will hear from Henry Parker of the Baltimore Eligible Project.
Okay. I'm talking to y'all about this law that was passed this year in 2023 about children having a lawyer or a parent with them when they get interrogated about court. I feel like this is very important because as kids, we should have the same rights to a lawyer or have somebody serious with us when it comes to this type of stuff. Certain things like that, anything like dealing with police or anything serious, we should always have somebody that have our backs that have somebody that try to switch out words with us. And it's been a lot of situations like that happen. But some people where police try to switch their words up against them, but at the same time, they're not thinking straight. Oh, they know that they just get scared and long, so they don't have enough help to think that they do. I feel like this is a good law for us teens and youth because it's been like certain situation where you might have to get yourself stick in some type of trouble. But I feel like even though you get yourself in a situation, you should have always have somebody with you that's not going to tell you that, or you will observe them or be with that instead of having somebody like, okay, I'm going to go. Tell me what you know, or tell me something. Just let them know that you don't have nothing to do with this. So I feel like this is a good law. Questions?
All right, Now we will hear from Jenny Egan, Public Defender for Children, Maryland Office of Public Defenders, and the Maryland Youth Justice Coalition.
Hi, everybody. I wanted to start out today by noticing October is Youth Justice Action Month. That's part of what brings us here today on the first business day of Youth Justice Action Month. But we also found out something important today. More than 400 former youth detainees filed suit against the state of Maryland for sexual abuse they endured in DJS-run facilities like Charles Hickey, Cheltenham, and Backbone Youth Center today. I mention that because Maryland has, and I want to talk about that history and what brought us here today. Maryland has one of the most punitive, racist youth criminal legal systems in the country, a fact that landed us under a federal consent decree until 2012 for how children in our detention facilities were treated, and is what led us in 2020 to be declared one of the worst violators of children's human rights in the criminal legal system. After years of study, a bipartisan expert panel put forth a number of recommendations to improve the conditions of youth and how youth were treated in the criminal legal system in Maryland. In 2022, those laws went into effect. They have been in effect for a little over a year. The purpose of the juvenile justice reforms was to shrink the very large system that over-criminalizes and over-incarcerates Black and Latinx youth in Maryland. Prior to the pandemic, 2/3 of children that were taken out of their homes and put and incarcerated in Maryland, their most serious offense had been a misdemeanor. Juvenile justice reform was a series of laws that changed how very young, non-violent children were handled inside the criminal juvenile system, so that the system could better handle youth with more serious issues and more troubling behavior. All that to say is that the law has been in effect for a little over a year, as well as the Child Interrogation Protection Act has now been in effect for a year. The Office of the Public Defender has brought together a youth access to counsel hotline. We have answered more than 300 calls from young people who are facing interrogation by police, who were able to have an adult and an attorney advise them on one of the scariest days of their life. It has been both a profound experience for the attorneys who have been able to offer that support to youth, and to the youth and parents who have had the benefit and support of an attorney from the moment of arrest. All that to say, a year into these reforms, things are better in the juvenile justice system. Youth still make up a very small portion of overall arrests in the system. In 2021, adults were 13 times more likely to be arrested than youth for all crimes. Youth crime has declined significantly over the past decade, including youth violent crime that has dropped dramatically. What has not dropped and what has risen is that young people are more likely to be the victims of violence than they were 10 or 20 years ago. And what we also know and have learned is that incarceration is not the most effective or even an effective method at all for handling youth when they do make serious mistakes. For all of those reasons, we are here to talk about the successes of juvenile justice reform, the critical importance of the Child Interrogation Protection Act, and what steps Maryland needs to take next. Maryland continues to charge an inordinate amount of youth automatically in adult court. Maryland's prison population is 6% of Maryland's prison population was sent there when they were children. That's double the national average. In order to change that, we need to continue to build on a system that protects and serves youth rather than criminalizes and blames them for the world that adults have lived.
All right, we will hear from Davon Love, Public Policy Director with Leaders of the Beautiful Struggle.
So one of the things I want to share, I think it's really important when we think about the laws that govern our state, and we think about the way that certain things are legislated. When it comes to Black people, particularly Black youth, I have to think about the societal propaganda around notions of white supremacy and notions of Black inferiority. And one of the ways that shows up is the way that Black people are criminalized. And we think about, and the reason why I use the term propaganda is because it is that societal propaganda that causes too many people to render young folks, particularly young Black people, as inherently dangerous and criminal. And I think that's an important thing to think about when we look at the role the media has played. What we see is that the most extreme versions of brutality and criminality are the things that are front and center. But the majority of the young people that engage in the criminal justice system are not those extreme examples. But what happens is those are the images that folks get stuck in. And unfortunately, too many folks in the political arena are susceptible to that propaganda. That propaganda which allows the vast majority of young Black people to be subject to the kinds of policies that are dehumanizing. And I think it's also important to note that over the past several years, the fight against the criminal justice system's impact is something that, in fact, we've seen some pretty significant successes. Whether it was the repeal of the Maryland Law Enforcement Officer of Civil Rights, Anton's Law, the legalization of cannabis and some of the criminal justice reform there, the Child Interrogation Act, the Juvenile Justice Reform Council. These are ways that we've actually seen some successes in pushing back against the system. What we're seeing now is a reaction to our success. That when you think about law enforcement and prosecutors and conservative media, this is their moment in pushing back against that progress. And so that's why it's really important for us to be here today. Because when we look at the way the young people have been kind of irreversibly impacted by the criminal justice system, it actually contributes to the crime and violence that we see in our communities, where young people are subject to the kind of conditions we see behind bars, and when we see the interactions that young people have with law enforcement. The thing I'll leave you with is, there was a study that was done years ago that I cite quite often, The Essence of Innocence, where essentially they did a study where they looked at the way that Black youth are perceived versus their white counterparts. And it said, Philip Goff was one of the lead researchers, and one of the things that study concluded was that Black youth are often assessed at about 6 to 10 years older than their actual age. And a part of why they were assessed as older and the impact that it has is that they're being more culpable for their behavior, less innocent, and less deserving of the proper treatment that they should have as young people. And so the pushback against Child Interrogation Protection Act and the pushback against the Juvenile Justice Reform Council are part and parcel of an attack on the societal, part of the societal attack on the humanity of people of African descent. So for me, it's important to put that in this context so that when we think about the importance of protecting these reforms and pushing over additional ones, right? We still are in a state that automatically charges you as adults, right? And unfortunately, we're in a political climate where that may be hard for us to push through, right? That young people should have access to the services the juvenile system provides to provide that rehabilitative support. But being that the propaganda will make it difficult to pass a law that's so important, again, there's even more reason why we should be standing here in support of the good work that's been happening. And fortunately, we do have some legislators and political officials that are willing to push forward. We should continue to support those that are pushing forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. We will now hear from Dana Vickers-Shelley, Executive Director of ACLU.
Hi, good evening. I'm Dana Vickers-Shelley, Executive Director of the ACLU of Maryland. My pronouns are she and they. As National Youth Justice Action Month kicks off, I can't think of a better place for us to be. One, we need to be here, and it's great that we're here because we have a message that folks outside this building and these streets need to hear. That children have the right to be protected by attorneys and those who care about their humanity and their livelihood. Today you have a chance, as you're listening to the speakers tonight, to get the facts, which is not what you'll hear beyond these walls until tonight. And then you'll be able to take this message and these words with you as you leave. The ACLU of Maryland joins the No Boundaries Coalition, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, the Algebra Project, Mr. Henry Parker, and many others in advocating for the Child Interrogation Protection Act. We're calling on Maryland's legislative leaders and members to join Delegate Sandy Bartlett's call to protect the basic process rights, the due process rights of Black and brown children. And I'm glad this bill is called the Child Interrogation Protection Act, because we need to remember that until you're 18 years old, you are a child. And in too many places, Black and brown children are called youth, juveniles, referred to in other ways than who they are as people based on their age, the grade they're in, and their developmental stage. We're calling on these legislators to pass the Child Interrogation Protection Act. Here are some facts about CIPA that all of us need to know and understand. The law requires an attorney to be consulted before police interrogate a child in custody to make sure that their Miranda rights are covered and they're explained in a way that the child can understand. The child's parents or guardians are also notified when the child is taken into custody. CIPA would prohibit law enforcement from interrogating a child if the child hasn't been allowed to talk to an attorney. Despite what you may have seen in the news, police can still talk to the child as well as interview witnesses and community members, but first and foremost, the child must be represented by an attorney. This law is critical because children aren't used to and don't have the experience to go through something as intimidating as a police interrogation. It's intimidating for anyone, especially a child. Studies show that children more often waive their Miranda rights up to 90% of the time, and they're 3 times more likely to make a false confession, more so than adults. So again, we have to protect children, what their experience is, and they must be represented by attorneys. It is dangerous and misleading for prosecutors, the state's attorneys here in Baltimore City, across the state of Maryland, to argue that an attorney advising children of their rights might be unconstitutional. That's ridiculous. Accessing our Miranda rights is a fundamental procedure that safeguards all our constitutional rights. Miranda informs us of the right to remain silent and your right to speak with an attorney. And then if you choose, if the child chooses, or the child's family, if the child refuses to have that representation, they're allowed to make that decision. Once a child is informed of their rights, they can choose to have the attorney present, request a private attorney, or make other arrangements. Advising a child of their rights is not the same as denying a child the right to pick their representative or refuse representation. And telling parents to force their children to waive their rights or to confess risks potentially destroying the parent's relationship with their child makes the parent a potential witness in their child's case. No one should want, not law enforcement, not state's attorneys, and definitely not the child and their family, want the child to lose those protections. Thank you for the opportunity tonight to join youth, community leaders, and CIPA legislative sponsor Delegate Bartlett in setting the record straight about the Child Interrogation Protection Act. It's going to be very important that those of us in this room, people we know, people in our communities and our coalitions, spread the word about what you have heard tonight, what you have heard from Public Defender Egan, what you've heard from Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle Policy Director Davon Love, what you've heard from Henry Parker, and what you'll hear from others in this room, because there is too much noise that's not helpful, that's wrong, and that's loud. And we can be correct, and we can be louder. When the ACLU says we focus on protecting the rights and uplifting the humanity of all Marylanders, this includes our children's too. Thank you.
So now we are going to have closing remarks by Reverend Ryan Merrick. Okay. My order is out. Rewind. All right, so we'll have a few words from Delegate Sandy Bartlett, Vice Chair of the House Judiciary Committee.
I've been an MC, and it's a tough job, so let's make sure we give her another hand. I'm excited to be here for several reasons. One, because the launch of National Youth Justice Action Month, but also because I've never been in this building before. Baltimore Unity Hall, I love it. This is actually, really, this is beautiful. And I do want to come back again. Invitation or not, I probably will. So the good thing is, I'm not going to talk long because everyone has said the meat of the bill, the meat of the law actually, the Child Interrogation Protection Act. I'll tell you just a few things as to why we passed this law and some of the things that went into it. Well, one thing is, a lot of times children don't know that police can mislead them, okay? So it is the law, it is the law of the Supreme Court, it is the law of the land. That is okay. But that's contrary to what we teach our children. We teach our children not to lie, right? We teach our children to always tell the truth, especially when you're talking to an adult. So it's very tricky. And studies have shown, as Executive Director David Dicker-Shelley said, studies have already shown that when confronted in certain environments with law enforcement, children are going to say almost anything, right? I love what Henry said about it is good to have someone important in the room with you to let you know that it's okay, that you're okay, that this may be one of the worst days of your life, but it's okay, and you're going to make it through it. That's what the attorneys can do. So, did we tie police officers' hands, as many have been chanting? No. We do not tie anyone's hands. What we do require, though, is that in order to put a child in custody, meaning that they do not feel free to leave, and ask them questions, you have to provide an attorney first. Basic. This is from the Fifth Amendment, folks. This is from Miranda that's been around for 57 years. We didn't make this all up, all right? The only part that we did make up is that if you're going to do it, you got to notify the parents, right? Parents deserve to know where their children are. Parents deserve to know what their child is, why their child is in custody, and how do I get my child out of this particular custody. So yeah, we put that in the law. The last thing I wanted to mention to you all is that it took 3 years. 3 years to get this law enacted. So we didn't just do this on a whim. And Jim, you might have did that the whole time. I wasn't. But I came in and basically, scored the touchdown, right? I came in and we had a chance to pass it. But many people had done the work before me. All the stakeholders were invited to the table. Many of the folks that you see represented here were there. They gave their input. But I'm the type of person, I don't listen to just the people who agree with me. I listen to the people who oppose as well. So we had the state's attorneys there. We had police officers, chiefs and sheriffs there. I even talked to police officers. They helped to draft the law. So in doing that, everyone contributed because we know that working together works better. So the time has come. The time has come to protect our children. In fact, the time has long passed to stop the false confessions. CIPA is a way to do both. And I'm going to close with a quote from Frederick Douglass. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Let's continue to build strong children. Thank you.
All right, so for real this time. I'm going to call on Reverend Brian Murray with Breathe Maryland for our closing remarks.
Good evening. I am really Reverend Brian Murray. Before I offer the comments, I'll also say that I spent my adult life in the city of Baltimore, but I was born and raised in New York City. And I went to high school in Manhattan, about half an hour from Central Park. We're all aware of what occurred in Central Park that changed the lives of 5 young boys, no different than my friend behind me. And what that did was not only hurt that woman, but it traumatized us 3 times. It traumatized those young boys being falsely accused. It traumatized a city after the discovery of their innocence. And in the production of a movie that captured that event, it traumatized a good friend of mine and several people in the state of Maryland to the point of working toward a child interrogation, and let me get the letters right, Child Interrogation Protection Act. And so with that in mind, on behalf of Bridge, Maryland, we speak in favor of, if I may, CIPA. I like that a lot better than the number, House Bill 269, and throughout the state. So we foremost want to say thank you to all of the people that were responsible for passing this bill out of committee in 2021. We applaud your efforts to protect our most valuable population in Maryland. With this bill, and many like it, we've already submitted, Bridge has already submitted written testimony. So I'm just going to remind some and appeal to others what it is for our children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and the next generation to feel cared for while in the custody of law enforcement, of police officers. Bridge, Maryland's membership of 7 faith traditions feels it is our moral imperative to protect young people from the risk of emotional, cultural, and situational trauma that could impact them into their adulthood. One sacred text, the Talmudic text says, our children are our guarantors. The sacred text of the Torah and the Jewish tradition says, children's children are a crown to the aged, and parents are the pride of their children. Our sacred text from the words of Jesus the Christ of the Bible, of the New Testament Bible says, see that you do not despise one of these little ones. I tell you that the angels in heaven always see the face of my Father in heaven. And so we support this bill because it is reasonable, a reasonable request to notify a parent and or guardian that their child is in custodial interrogation. It is a reasonable request and due process, mind you, that a child or youth hears and understands Miranda that is spoken to them. Thank you, Melanie Bartlett. Thank you, Madam Executive Director. Thank you. It is a reasonable request that an attorney be present for a child before they even open their mouth while in custodial care. And so I'm going to close with a quote from a trauma expert, Dr. Terry Shaw. Dr. Terry Shaw says, children are good recorders of trauma, but poor interpreters of trauma. So why should we put our children at risk for an event that could scar them for life when we can protect them from that event? Bridge, Maryland, a Maryland Youth Justice Coalition member, urges you to vote again in favor of the Child Interrogation Protection Act. Let me just walk away by saying this. When I was doing research as a senior fellow with my denomination, the United Church of Christ, I discovered that in the state of Maryland, I believe it's somewhere in the excess of $1,000 a day to keep a young person incarcerated. I got a headline. What that translates into is the state is paying more to incarcerate a young person than a Harvard education. Thank you very much.
All right. On behalf of No Boundaries Coalition, I want to thank all of our partners for joining us tonight. honor of Youth Justice Month, we will be offering a host of activities for young people. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and visit our website, NoBoundariesCoalition.com, to learn more about those events. We will be hosting, in partnership with ACLU, a voting rights workshop. So we don't just stop the conversation here tonight. We're actually being active with the young people, with the community, making sure that they are aware of their rights. So I want to thank you all for coming out. Grab some information off of the tables, and you also take it out into the community as well. Thank you all.